Hello everyone. Here we are going to discuss about different types of hydraulic structures. So when we talk about hydraulic structures, the first things that come to mind are mostly dams, and then weirs and barrages are also different types of structures. And then these are called the water retaining structures, and then there are the water conveyance structures such as canals, spillways and tunnels. And then there are some other structures which are sometimes standalone structures, and sometimes they simply accompany these systems of dams and canals, etc. So we'll mostly be focusing on dams and weirs in this whole course. So when we talk about dams, there are different types. That is gravity dam, arch dam, embankment dam and buttress dam. These are the most common types of dams, but then there are some hybrid types of dams where one or two of these types of dams can be, their principles can be combined. So let's look at how they look like. So here there are some very simple 3D descriptions of these different types of dams. So these are all made in the SketchUp software. So first let's look at a gravity dam. So a gravity dam looks something like this. It's generally made of masonry or concrete, and the basic profile of this dam is like a right angle triangle with there is some top width provided for transportation purpose, and when we construct it across a river, generally these are constructed in rivers, then it would look something like this. And behind the dam we are storing water like this, because suppose earlier the water depth was not much lower. Just because of construction of the dam, water is being stored in the upstream, and we have created this kind of a large reservoir. This blue transparent surface is representative of the water. The next type that we can discuss is an arch dam. So an arch dam works with the same principle as an arch, where load is applied, and through the arch load is transferred through compression and then transferred to the supports. Similarly, in arch dam also, the load or the force, hydrostatic force of water behind the dam will be transferred to these abutments or the banks of the river valley, and in this way this arch dam will work. Then the third type is embankment dam. So embankment, by the name embankment, we imagine this kind of a structure where it's generally made of earth or rocks, and we use these embankments for roads and railways as well, where we construct a road on top of this surface, or we lay railway lines on this top width. This embankment itself can be used as a dam like this, and to provide some protection, because it is generally made of soil and rocks, to provide some surface protection, we generally provide this kind of rock layers like this. Similarly, similar to the previous types of dams, we again have large reservoir behind this dam. Then comes something called a buttress dam. The buttress dam is basically a slab which is supported on these kind of buttresses. So this is called a buttress dam, and This inclined slab will be supported on these inclined buttresses, which are basically compression members, and water is retained by this kind of dams, as you can see in this figure. There are different types of buttress dams also. This is a very simple type, but there are these types of buttress dams where the heads of the buttresses are enlarged so that they themselves form this slab. But here we will have to provide some kind of seal to prevent leakage of water through these gaps. Then there is another type, which is where the deck slab is actually a series of slabs which are simply supported on the buttresses instead of being a continuous slab. Here also we may have to provide these kind of seals. The seals are generally made of some composition of metal sheets and bituminous substances. So there is another type of buttress dam where the slab is turned into arches, multiple arches. So this is another type of buttress dams. These are not. This is not an exhaustive list of types of dams. There are different types, slightly varying in nature and principle. So let's have a look at some real life examples. For that, we'll take help of Google Maps. So here in Google Maps, if we search, I've simply selected these dams from a list of dams. So the first one is Olivenhain Dam in the United States. So if we look at the map, then we're going to see we have to switch to the satellite view here. So this is the dam. I've selected this dam because the 3D representation in Google Maps is a little bit better than other dams. So if we pan around, you can see this is a gravity dam because it has this right angle triangle like profile, although at the top it is not a sharp edge. It has some amount of width so that some vehicles can pass over that. So this dam is, if you look at the upstream, we have this large reservoir, and generally dams are constructed in rivers, but here we do not see any river because this is at the very upper end of the beginning of a very small stream. So this is the stream, very small river, and earlier, before the construction of the dam, it was a small valley of the stream. Because of construction of the dam, now whatever water is collected by this area from rain, it will be stored, and this dam, this reservoir is used for the sole purpose of water supply to the nearby areas. And we can also see this water treatment plant here. And generally these dams are used for other purposes such as power generation, then irrigation and all these things, but this dam is not used for all those purposes. It is only used for water supply. Then there will move on to the next example. So this is the Theodore Roosevelt Dam. Again, we are going to open it in maps, switch to satellite view. So here it is. Now you can see this is an arch dam, and here it is constructed further downstream in the river. So the reservoir is also much larger, and you can see two rivers this one, and from the other side this one. These two rivers were joining at this point, and that's where we constructed the dam. And now you can see how the whole landscape has changed just due to the construction of this dam. We have turned those rivers into a large reservoir. Now, if we think why this dam was created, it's not very obvious just by looking at these satellite images. That's because here we do not see any big arrangement for power generation, although this dam does have a small power generation capacity, which is of somewhat around 30 or 40 megawatts. But this is not the entire purpose of this dam. A major purpose of this dam was flood control. That means when flood comes, the water level of the dam before the flood will be kept at a lower level, and because it has that empty capacity before the flood, so it will be able to store that flood and release it in a controlled manner to the downstream. Then if we go further downstream, you'll be able to see that again the width of the river increases. So it is an indication that there is some obstacle in the middle, and the point where again you can see the river width decreases. Here if we focus, then you'll see that there is another dam here, again an arch dam. So this arch dam also has some additional control over this whole river. We are not going to be able to discuss much about this because the images are not very clear, because the satellite took the images when there was a large shadow on this dam, as you can see. Then if we move further downstream, again the width of the river increases. That means there is another dam here. So let's have a look where that dam is. Not this side. Here it is. So this is another arch dam. The name is not showing right now. So this is the main dam. Let's see if the 3D representation is done well. No, that's because somebody has to make a three-dimensional model and then upload it and then incorporate in Google Maps. Then only you'll see the 3D view of the structures. But for this particular dam, nobody has done that. Now, but still we can have some idea of this dam. Here you can see, if you can see my mouse cursor, there is a pipe coming out of this dam which is conveying water from the reservoir behind it, and it is transferring that water into this powerhouse. So this powerhouse is generating electricity from the water which is stored in this reservoir. Then there is this particular structure which is actually called a spillway. A spillway, here we are not going to see it with a clear picture, but still a spillway is a bypass for water to move to the downstream when the water level is very high. In a dam, generally we do not allow water to pass over the dam, because as you can see, you have also seen in the previous dam examples, there can be a roadway at the top of the dam where vehicles can travel. Therefore, we are not going to allow water to flow over the dam. So therefore, we provide a separate path for the water to flow, the excess water to flow. That means when there is a flood, if the reservoir is about to overflow, then this spillway is going to allow that water to flow into the downstream. So you can imagine this is like a ramp through which water can be released and it will fall into the downstream. Are there any other dams in the downstream? Likely. And yes, there is another one. Again, this is an arch dam. Here also you can see that there is this spillway for the excess water, for releasing the excess water, and there is another spillway on this side. So two spillways, and this is probably the discharge from the turbine. I'm not sure, but looks like it. Or maybe some additional spillway which is slowly releasing the water when the water we need to release the water, but the level of water is not up to the level of the spillways. So in that case we are having to release it through some pipe through the dam. So you have the basic idea of how these dams are constructed and where they are constructed and what is the result of their construction. This whole river looks like an interesting case. So let's move further downstream and see if there is any other dams. Again, the river width is constant or very narrow. That means there are no dams. But here again we can see some increase in width, and that's because it looks like a dam, but it is, yes, it is a dam, but it is not a very big one. It's a very small dam, and that's why the reservoir created behind this dam is not that large. And the reason why this is not a big dam is that because the land has become flatter. In the earlier cases, it was in the mountain range, but now we have come closer to civilization, to the plain lands, and therefore if we construct a bigger dam, then it is going to submerge this whole area, a much bigger area underwater, which we do not want. Therefore we are simply constructing a very small dam. So this is called granite reef dam, and its height is very low, and from this dam, as you can see, these canals are branching off, one on this side, then another one on this side. So the main purpose of this dam was not to construct to create a big reservoir, but just to raise the water level to such an extent so that it can be diverted to these canals. So now these canals will serve a different purpose, and that is irrigation. So all these canals, they are carrying water to the nearby area, and you can see the development of agricultural activities here. See how many agricultural fields are being supplied from these canals. And possibly this is also used for domestic and industrial water supply. I'm not sure, but it looks like the case. So just by trying to look at one example of arch dam, we found a series of dams, and also we saw how different purposes can be fulfilled by these different types of dam projects. Then let's have a look at another type of dam, which is a buttress dam. So if we look at the map and switch to satellite view, so this is called the Bartlett Dam, and as you can see, this is, as we have discussed earlier, it is a multiple arch type buttress dam. So these are the buttresses, and between two buttresses there is an arch. Again, there is a spillway, and I'm not sure why this dam is used, so we may have some idea if we look closely. This is possibly a powerhouse with a single turbine here, through which you can see the water is being discharged. A quick Wikipedia search confirmed that this dam was mainly constructed for the purpose of flood control. And as you can see, the banks of this reservoir, a good portion is, you can see the white marks, that means the areas without vegetation, that means that is the area, that is the height up to which it can store water. And right now it is, when this satellite picture was taken, this is kept at a lower level so that when the flood comes it can be stored. And this is a spillway which is having some gates. Then there is another spillway created here which is ungated and only in the form of a small embankment, and therefore possibly this is not a turbine and this is only a measure of releasing the water before it reaches the top of this spillways. So now let's move on to some other example. So that is a dam called Orville Dam, and this is an example of an embankment dam. So this is what it looks like, and it is mostly constructed from soil materials with some protection provided at the top with stones on either side. And again you can see this spillway on the side through which the excess water can be released. This project is also used for hydropower generation, and you can see here Edward Hyatt power plant and substation. Where, so how is power produced? It's by letting the water in the dam flow through some turbines. So here we can see somewhere around here, you see water is being discharged, and that is through some turbines. After running through the turbines, water is being discharged, and the pipes will be mostly underground in this case, and they will have to run through the dam and underground, and then they will reach the turbines, and finally the water is being released here to the downstream. Now because we have these large reservoirs in the upstreams of these dams, they can also be used for different purposes such as recreational purposes. So somebody wants to go boating in this lake, so they can do that as well. So you can see these boats parked here. I'll not wait for complete loading of this 3D map because while capturing this whole video it will be very difficult to show all these and at the same time capturing. Anyway, so you get the idea how these lakes can be used for some other purposes besides the primary purpose such as irrigation or flood control or power generation. Then for things like fishing or navigation also these things can be used. When it comes to India, we have several dams, such as one of the example is Bhakra Dam, which is a very large dam. It's a concrete gravity dam, And if we switch to the satellite view, we can see here it is in Himachal Pradesh or Uttarakhand, I'm not sure. You can just make a quick Google search and see what is the actual boundary, in which state it lies. So this is the Bhakra Dam, although the 3D representation will not be proper here because it is not made by anybody, not created by anybody. And this image is simply the distorted image of this distorted form of the satellite picture. Again, behind this dam, we have this large reservoir. And generally, when we talk about Bhakra Dam, we call it Bhakra Nangal Dam, and that's because there is another dam. Although rather than calling it the dam, it's better to call it a barrage, which is called the Nangal Barrage. So this is a barrage. A barrage is basically a barrier where most of the water storage is done by opening or closing of a gate, closing of gates. So as you can see here, there are a series of gates which we definitely cannot see properly here, but these are used to store water or to at least raise the level of water so that they can be diverted to some other canals. So these canals are now going to carry water to and deliver it to a large area. As you can see nearby, definitely these kind of agricultural activities are being supplied with water from these canals. And let's see how long these canals go. If we keep going, you can see how long these canals are. I'm not going to complete the journey. You can see on your own just by going to Google Maps and follow the canals. So this whole green flat area is being, it's not actually forest, it is agricultural land, and they are provided water from these huge reservoirs. One is by Bhakra Nangal project, then there is another one here, which is now an embankment dam. And its name is Pong Dam. In this region, there are several other dams actually. You just keep exploring in Google Maps, you'll see all these dams. So these are some dams in India. There is another example of Idukki Dam, which is one of the few arch dams in India. So if we look at the map, so this is the Idukki Dam, which is an arch dam. And nearby, there is another dam, which is a gravity dam, which is called Cheruthoni Dam. And these two dams together are creating this reservoir. I think there is another dam nearby. Let's see. So this reservoir is created by a combination of three dams. One is this Idukki Dam, which is blocking this river. Then this Cheruthoni Dam is blocking this river. Then further towards south or north, I'm not sure. I think it is south. Yes, somewhere here. There is another dam, which is again a gravity dam. So all these three dams, you see, this is also blocking another small river. Without this dam, there would be a very small river here. Now, because this dam is created, that river didn't come into existence. So all these three dams have together created this huge reservoir of water. I think it is in Kerala. Yes, it is in Kerala. So these are different examples of dams. Now, in addition to dams, there are also weirs and barrages. One of the examples we already saw of a barrage, which is basically a gated structure, which is much smaller than a dam. That means in height. A weir is similar. So let's have a brief look at what a weir looks like. So this is again a 3D model of a weir with all the components. So you can see these two long lines, this one and this one. These are embankments constructed along the bank of the river. So this is going to be a distant direction of the river. So in this direction, if the river is flowing, then in the river we are going to construct this kind of, ignore this structure for now, and also let's ignore the top roadway for now. Let's delete it. Okay, so this is a weir. So weir is basically like a small dam, but one difference is that we also allow water to flow over the weir, unlike a dam. Generally, we construct a spillway near the dam so that the excess water can be released, but weir is designed to carry water above it, to allow water to flow over it. So this weir will raise the water level in the upstream of its upstream, and therefore the water level will rise, and then we can divert that water through these gates, either by opening or closing these gates, and then this canal can carry that water to agricultural fields. Under normal conditions, we have these extra gates on one side of the weir so that some water can be released to the downstream, and only in the case of high flood seasons, the water will actually flow over the weirs. Now the barrage is similar, but the height of the barrage will be much smaller. That is, the fixed height at least will be smaller. I'm not sure if it can be modified in this model, but anyway, you can understand that whatever height is provided in this weir, the height of the barrage will be smaller or almost negligible. That means the bottom will be at least at the same level as the riverbed, and here we will provide some gates, just like we have provided in this region. That means in a barrage, instead of only a portion of this thing being gated, the entire length from here up to here will be consisting of only gates, and all those gates will be opened or closed based on need to store water or release water. So we'll discuss this whole thing in much greater detail later on. So these are the basic structures, basic hydraulic structures that we are going to discuss, and we have discussed the purposes of dams. So there are artificial barriers. Then the basic purposes are power generation, irrigation, flood control, domestic and industrial water supply, navigation, fish cultivation sometimes, then recreation. Then purpose of weirs or barrages are also quite similar, but they are much smaller, and applications. One additional application of a weir is that in small to medium sized streams, a weir generally acts as a means of transforming the river cross section into a regular shape section. Generally, the river cross section will be somewhat like this, but if we construct the weir, then instead of this, we can turn it into some regular shape, either rectangular or triangular, so that discharge measurement becomes easier. Because we have studied the weir formulas or the notch formulas, so an irrigation and water supply, we have already seen how this plays out. And flood control, although it is not very effective in flood control like a dam, but still it can give us some relief. Then basic difference is water is not allowed to flow over a dam, but weirs are generally designed to let water flow over them, and there are no additional spillways. Then a weir is, so that is the basic difference. And generally, weir is smaller, dam is bigger. Barrages are similar, and they serve similar functions as weirs. So sometimes they are also constructed in tidal estuaries, and we'll discuss this in a separate lectures, a short lecture. And then the fundamental difference between a weir and a barrage is basically, if weir is mostly of fixed height and a barrage is of variable height, so that its fixed height is very small and most of the control of water is achieved by mechanical means by operating these kind of gates. So that's the basic understanding of what these structures are, why they are used, where they are used. So from next lecture onwards, we'll try to discuss the technicalities, the basic principles of their construction, and so on. So thank you. That's all for this lecture.